So our speaker here today has two options to present today. He just is curious which one you would prefer. One would be more research and studies, things of that nature. Option B would be more conversational and talking, things of that nature. So which one would you prefer? Would you prefer option A, more research, studies, things of that nature? Raise your hands if that's what you're looking for. Okay. How many of you would prefer more talking, lecture style, and I'm hoping I'm getting these right. I'm sure if I don't get it right, you'll ask them again when you come up here. How many of you would prefer more conversational? Okay. I think the researchers have it by my count. So, okay. Well, with that, we're going to welcome our speaker, who's going to let us know how we can remove our stress levels. Shipping your kids off to boarding school is not an option.
Okay, is this on? Okay, great. So I apologize. I mentioned the wrong one for the third one today. I looked on my notes and y'all had changed it, but I didn't change it on my notes. And so it was going to be a topic, Satan's ultimate weapon, but y'all decided to talk on reversing cardiovascular disease. And so that's what the next one will be. This one will be on stress, and the next one will be cardiovascular disease. Let me come down here. I'd rather talk down here. Can we start with prayer? We haven't started with prayer yet, have we? Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for such a good meal and camaraderie. Lord, as we look at a huge issue out there today, and that's stress, Lord, help us to better understand how to combat it, how to manage it. We know we can't plumb get rid of it because we're still on this earth. But someday, we will have no stress. And Lord, we look for that day. Help us to discern. Help us to learn how to apply. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. How many of y'all don't have stress? Did our guy from Kenya live? Is he coming? You know, when I went to Rwanda the first time, and I asked, and I would sit down with people individually to work with their health issues. And I would say, tell me, do you have stress? No stress. And nobody had stress except one guy, and he came to see me. And it was amazing how you'd sit down with somebody, they'd be an ambassador, or they'd be over the prison system, or they'd be whatever, and this guy's sitting there, and maybe he just talked more to me because I'm a fire chief, and he worked in law enforcement, and I could tell he had a high position. I thought he was maybe he's chief of police in Kigali. Well, it turned out he was chief of police for the whole country of Rwanda. And he's the only one in my first trip that identified stress. Everybody else, no stress. Didn't matter who I was talking to. If it was a person on the street, or if it was an ambassador, or if it was a person that was a Supreme Court justice or whatever. But my second visit, they started trusting me, and they have stress. And I think with the transition of, trying to put past behind, President Paul just says, let's look forward. Let's not talk about that. And yes, they had stress. Can you imagine? I met one lady, and she, her mother and all her kids were slaughtered. Can you imagine that? Or the conference president I mentioned this morning, his wife and all 8 of his children slaughtered. I met people there that had no family. No spouse, no parents, no aunts, uncles, no cousins, no children. No, they were like an island because they had nobody. They had all been slaughtered. That would be stress, would it not? And if, now I shouldn't use that word because that's how Christ knew it was Satan. But I like if-then statements. That was true. It is true that it will be a time as never before. It's going to be worse than that. And so as we deal with stress today, and we wonder how do we deal with stress? I mean, you know, some people have stressful jobs. Some people have stressful whatever lives. And in getting a hold of that, can we get a hold of it? Well, yes, because God wants us to be able to. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge for me at times. It's a challenge for all of us at times, is stress. And what we'd like to look at here is how do we better cope with or address stress physiological. So I'm going to take a look first at effects of stress and anxiety on the body. And sometimes I like knowing information to make an informed decision. And I'm sure most of y'all do. And so if you can better understand the effects of stress on us, besides I'm just going nuts, but physiologically, what's really happening to us? And why do we need to address it? And then I'm going to talk about, are there natural treatments for stress and anxiety? As we look at anxiety, post-COVID, we're seeing a whole lot more anxiety. As I talk to folks who are seeing patients in mental health, they're telling me there's a whole lot more stress. Do you see anxiety? Do you see a lot more anxiety? Absolutely. And so how do we help folks there? So let's first look at effects of stress and anxiety on the body. What is stress? Let's go back. The relation which exists between the mind and the body is very intimate. And I'm going to give you prescriptions today. No, I'm not a medical doctor, but I believe I can legally give you these prescriptions today. I encourage you to write them down, and I'll tell you when they're coming up. Okay, the relation which exists between the mind and the body is very intimate. When one is affected, the other sympathizes. The condition of the mind affects the health and the physical system. If the mind is free and happy, there's your first prescription. Is that okay for me to share these prescriptions? Who are they from? God. The medical director. Yes? Is God not the medical director? He is the medical director. And if you go and you just don't feel comfortable with what's going on with your health, and you're being persuaded to do something, just say, I need to talk to the medical director. And we're very fortunate that we live in the South. We live in the Bible Belt. And yes, there's a lot of move-ins who don't believe like we do here in the South, that don't have that Bible Belt roots that we have. But if your healthcare provider says, I don't care what your medical director says, you need to do this, you need a different healthcare person. Because God is our medical director. Would you agree? Yes. If you are going to buy a car, Carson, who was born when we were here, Carson just bought a truck this week. If you pray to choose your truck, which truck to buy, if you pray and ask God which house to buy, even more so, you should pray on what the protocol is for you to do for your health. Would you agree? Absolutely. And the best person to talk to about that is God. Just as God directs you on, yes, don't buy that car. A couple years ago, I don't even know if I've told Mary Lou about this. She was gone. She was in Alabama. And she knows I would love to have a Super M. How many of y'all know what a Super M is? A Super M? M as in Mary? So, did I ever tell you about that? So, there is a Super M, and even when I lived here, I was looking at Super M's. It's a tractor. It's a farm-all tractor. And 2 years ago, I found one. And the price, it had brand new rubber on it, brand new back tires, brand new front tires. And the price they were asking for it was less than the cost that they just paid for all new tires. Now, is that a good deal? Absolutely, it's a good deal. Did I tell you about that, Mary Lou? No. I don't think I told you. And so I prayed, God, do I buy this tractor? It was a good deal, a really good deal. I could afford it. No. Okay. So then I went back and I said, God, this is a great deal. I could do hay rides with the grandkids. We could just have so much fun. No. And I went a week praying on this thing. Come on, God, this is a great deal. You know I've been wanting one of these. It looks brand new. It's got great paint. It's got new rubber on the tires. It runs great. No. I didn't tell you, did I? She was down in Alabama. I have some issues I'll talk about later. So I called the man up, and I said, sir, this is the advantage of living in the South. And y'all from around here understand me. I called the man up, and he'd offered me a tremendous deal. And I said, sir, I would love to have that tractor. But God said no. So I can't buy it from you. He says, I understand. I mean, just like, I understand. There was no, mister, this is a deal. No. He understood that I had prayed. God had said no. It wasn't for me. So if it is for our vehicles or our whatever, should it not also be for our health? Absolutely it should. Okay. So number one, if the mind is free and happy from a consciousness of right doing and a sense of satisfaction in causing happiness to others, it creates a cheerfulness that will react upon the whole system, causing a freer circulation of the blood and a toning up of the entire body. Isn't that cool? That's prescription number one. I hope you're taking notes. A great deal of the sickness which afflicts humanity has its origins in the mind and can only be cured by restoring the mind to health. There are very many more than we imagine who are sick mentally. Heart sickness makes many dyspeptics, for mental trouble has a paralyzing influence upon the digestive organs. A couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, I was up in Minnesota. I was up right outside of Mayo Clinic speaking. And my aunt in Chattanooga, her husband owned an oil company. They had quite a bit of money. And he died. I don't remember if she was this way before he died or not, but when he died, if you went to her house and you had arthritis, she had arthritis, she'd go to Mayo, check it out, up to Rochester. Or if you went to her house and you had ulcerative colitis, she had ulcerative colitis, and she'd go up to Mayo. And she just knew she had it up here. Mary Lou and I, we were, it's not time. So Mary Lou and I were, it was a Sunday, and we were driving down off the mountain. We live up on a mountain, a little cabin. And we were driving to, it was Sunday afternoon, about 1 o'clock, and we were driving into the office to do some work. And we come around the corner, and a neighbor was there. He was using it, goes up every once in a while, but he lived in Charlotte. And he was there. He came out in a robe, a bathrobe, and his hair was just all night messed up. And I said, what's wrong with you? You okay? He goes, no. I said, what's wrong? He says, I'm dying. I said, what's wrong? He says, I went to the hospital in Charlotte, and they said, I have lung cancer. I'm dying. I said, where are the wife and kids? He said, I left in Charlotte. I didn't want them to see me die. He said, just watch me. In other words, watch him until he falls over and dies, and I find him, and then I'll call the wife and tell him, your husband's dead. So Mary Lou starts making juices for him, making soups for him. He gets worse and worse and worse. He was actually confined to the couch, couldn't get up and down, and his brother had to come and take care of him. He was so bad. He got so bad that he was now starting to have problems breathing. And I told him, I said, you need to have oxygen. He said, I've used all my money. I don't have any money left. He said, I can't afford it. I said, well, go to UT. They'll run you through the system. It's a state hospital. They can get you on Medicaid, and you can get oxygen, at the time at which you need it. But you're going to need oxygen because you're going to start hurting. Well, he ignored me and ignored me. He got worse and worse. And finally, I talked his brother into taking him to UT. Takes him to UT, and then I'm coming down the mountain. There he is walking around. Look fine, look normal. I said, what's going on? He says, I went to UT like he told me. He says, They misdiagnosed me over in Charlotte. I'm fine. I don't have cancer. I think the guy would have died possibly. Isn't it amazing how strong the mind is? Huge. The mind controls the whole man. All our actions, good or bad, have their source in the mind. It is the mind that worships God and allies us to heavenly beings. Yet many spend all their lives without becoming intelligent in regard to the casket, jewel case that contains this treasure. Yes, we need to protect our heart. Yes, we'll need to protect our digestive system. But we got to protect our brains. Because as those little kids, when I go on the school system, says, if we don't protect it, we make stupid decisions. 9/10 of the diseases from which men suffer have their foundation in the mind. And that don't mean you're crazy. There's an old doc years ago, he taught me, he says, Walt, if you want to help correct illness, he says, you got to identify the organ and the system, which is the primary problem. Then you have to identify the organs and systems which affect the primary organ and system. Once you've identified those, then you take away anything that can cause harm to those organs and systems, and you provide what those organs and systems need. So, stress, anxiety, what organ are we dealing with or system? What's the organ? The brain. So that's the brain. Now, okay, so now we've got a primary organ. What are the secondary, tertiary, whatever organs or systems that can affect the function of the brain? Pardon? Adrenals? Absolutely. Adrenals are a big issue today because of stress blows the adrenals. Digestion? Huge. Huge. I was going, Mary Lou was pregnant with Walter, and a bunch of us from work went and we'd gone out and gone on the Ocoee, work had a big event out on the Ocoee rafting. I went back to Fort Oglethorpe, which is outside of Chattanooga, to see my aunt and uncle for something. And then I was driving back up to Cleveland to pick up Mary Lou and head on home. And she'd bought an IROC Z28. Remember them cars? Whew, that was a fun car. So I leave my aunt and uncle's house, and it's starting to sprinkle. And then I hadn't got 2 blocks away, and it's raining cats and dogs. I mean, it's pouring. And I come up to a stop sign, and I put the brakes on, and that IROC just kept on going, right through that stop sign. And I got T-boned on the driver's side by the preacher who was coming to preach that Sunday night at the Baptist church. So I get out of the car, and we didn't have cell phones back then, so I walked to the neighbor's house, and I had to crawl out the window. And I went to the neighbor's house, called the police, called my uncle, said, come on over and get me. My car's tore up. And the police chief comes. Well, what got me out of the ticket, which I got a ticket, but that Tuesday night, that's how fast they worked on the court system there. That was Sunday evening. Tuesday night, I was in court. And they were going to cite me for running stop sign and causing the wreck. And the judge said, well, why did it happen? I said, it's slick. I said, it's so slick, the police chief ended out in somebody's yard. And she says, Chief, is that true? You're a good driver. Did you end out in somebody's yard? Yes, ma'am. She says, I can't charge this man if you can't even stay on the road. So I didn't get a ticket. But my uncle, when he came up to me, he was talking, and he gets me, and he's putting me in his car, and he says, tomorrow you're going to have green apple two-step. Now, y'all know what green apple two-step is. Anybody? What happens if you eat too many green apples? You get the two-step. Yeah. And I tell my uncle, I say, I'm fine. My digestive system's good. I'm not going to have diarrhea tomorrow. I'm good. And he says, son, trust me. Tomorrow you're going to have a green apple two-step. He don't know what he's talking about. He was a Methodist. And guess what happened to me the next day? Green apple two-step. Did I mess up here? No, but I messed up here. So as this can affect this can affect this. And so as we look at health issues, you got to take away anything that can cause harm. You got to give whatever it takes to make it work healthy, and then also address the systems or organs that affect the primary organ that you're having the problems. Does that make sense? It's pretty easy. I'm just no farm boy. It's simple. Okay. So 9/10 of the diseases, stress, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, are those brain things? So you got brain things? Do you have stress? I'm not saying you're crazy, but you got stress. That's a brain thing. So that's what it's talking about. 9/10 of the diseases from which men suffer have their foundation in the mind. Stress is one. What is stress? And this is the definition. Stress is the body's response to a real or perceived threat or stressor. Stress is our body's internal alarm system. Stress prepares the body to take action. 3 types of stress: acute, episodic acute, and chronic. This is American Psychological Association. So, what is acute stress? Immediate onset, which forces the body into an immediate reaction. Minor traffic accident, an argument, impending deadline. So that's something that, do you ever get them? Something just sets you off real good? Might be a phone call you're on. Someone sets you off real good. Or whatever it may be. It's acute. A hospital is an acute place. Chronic is like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Your first cigarette, you don't get emphysema. You don't, so acute is right now. Episodic acute, what's that? Acute stress, which occurs frequently. It happens quite often. Escalating demands for personal time and attention. Do you ever feel like someone's pulling you from all directions? Yes. Ceaseless worry and anxiety, type A behavior characterized by a competitive drive, aggressiveness, impatience, urgency. Do you know them people? Do you live with them people? Maybe yourself you're living with that way. Yeah. And it causes stress. Chronic stress. Long-term stress, unrelenting job. That's a huge one. Family pressures, sleep deprivation, strained role and responsibilities at work and at home. Long-term stress. It has been estimated, this is really interesting, look at this. It's been estimated that 75 to 90% of all visits to primary care physicians are for stress-related problems, as that's the root issue going on. That's significant. Job stress is far and away the leading source of stress for adults. But stress levels have also escalated in children, teenagers, college students, and the elderly for other reasons, including increased crime. Y'all's crime rate going up? Yes. Violence and other threats to personal safety, pernicious peer pressures that lead to substance abuse and other unhealthy lifestyle habits. Social isolation and loneliness. We saw that especially during COVID. The erosion of family and religious values and ties. You know, when I moved to, we've been in Newport now for 19 years. And when I moved to Newport, I go into factories and places and I do remember the Breezel-Belloc study? Y'all remember that? The health age analysis? So I go in and I look at that. It's Alameda County study. And when I first went there, now these are factories, 300-400 employees. And the last question on that survey is, what is your religious affiliation? Is it strong, moderate, or no interest in spirituality? When I first moved there, 19 years ago, I might have and that many employees. And those people talk like I do, so it was not a bunch of move-ins, it was local people. I might have maybe 3, 4 at the most that said they have no interest in God. Those that had moderate, it was less than 10. The majority had deep spiritual. Today, if I go, and this has happened over the last several years, I now see a whole lot more that have no interest in God. I see only a few that have deep religious conviction. And I'm talking less than 20. The majority of the people are in the middle now. and they talk like I do. Bible Belt people, something is going on. That's a huge indicator trending that really bothers me. The loss of their strong sources of social support that are powerful stress busters. And we look, what's another big stress issue out there today that we don't have mentioned there that we talked about earlier? Social media. And if you've done Battle of the Mind, you understand that. We are all subject to stressors. The amount of stress we experience depends on how we respond to them. Where's our firefighter? Is he still here? Okay, is he still here? My first house fire, Ottawa, 1982. It was a two-story family dwelling, 2 bedrooms upstairs, bathroom downstairs. You had the living room and the kitchen, and not much downstairs. Fire both bedrooms upstairs. So I had just joined the fire department, and you've got Tim Cumbo. Remember Tim Cumbo? And Worley. Both of those two were both. Cumbo was a captain. Worley was a lieutenant. I was following them. So we're going up. We're talking firefighter. So I'm heading up the stairs. Never been in a structure fire before. Heading up behind them. I'm on the hose line. Back then, 1.5 inches. Going up there, they plateau off. Chief always told us to do a right hand first, so they start knocking the right room down. And all of a sudden, poof, there is fire, called a flashover, from about this high up. I'd never seen that before. I was scared to death. I left them. Down the stairs I go. I'm trying to rip off I'm hyperventilating. I'm trying to rip my mask off. I'm bouncing down the stairs. And I'm a college student, so I'm fit. Get outside, rip off my helmet, rip off the mask. I'm hyperventilating. They bring me a bag. Today, yes, I know more of what to do to prevent a flashover. Yes, we see the signs. We can probably prevent it a lot of times. But even so, I'm down low and I'm not freaking out. It's kind of interesting, actually. You cool it down and you start seeing your signs, some spot flashes. You start seeing smoke running down, what you look for. I cool the room down. We're good. But what is the difference? How did my brain respond to it? You know what I'm talking about? Our first child, Walter, when he was sick, boom, Mary Lou had him to the doctor's office. If they were closed, we went to the ER. Ashley comes around. Carson came around when we got here. He'll be fine. Isn't that the way it is? We are all subject to stressors. The amount of stress we experience depends on how we respond to it. I'll tell you the biggest, what's the word I want to use? The biggest defense system we have is trusting God. Amen. Yes? It is true. The more you trust, the stronger that muscle is. Trust. You have a child that knows his daddy real good. He just goes over to daddy. He don't freak out. Daddy's going to take care of him. The more we have that relationship, the less we freak out. So you got a stressor, you got financial, work, relationships, health, traffic, pollution, whatever it may be, and you've got your response, verbal, physical, mental. The question is, how do you deal with it? It goes through the brain, or it should go through the brain. And so someone comes and they cuss you out, what do? Do you just cuss them right out? Or do you process it? I don't think people are processing today. Someone hits you or someone says something, you just punch them out. Or you take a gun and shoot them. I don't think they process and it runs through the brain. God gave us a brain to have information coming in, and then how we deal with that determines on the health and what that brain, what's the word to use? How we've trained that brain to deal with something. Yes? Has God taught you to be kind? Has God taught you to be loving? or are you just mean as a striped snake? And if you're mean as a striped snake, it may not take a lot of thought. You're just going to be mean as a striped snake. Back. Dr. Walter Cannon's classic research, Cat Confronted by a Dog. He took a cat that hated dogs. Anybody read this study? He took a dog that hated cats and a cat that hated dogs. He took the vitals, and it's been an hour. I'm going to take some sips of water. And he took the vitals on the cat, then he lets him go, and the dog starts chasing the cat, and the cat takes off, and then he snatches up the cat, and he takes the vitals again. This is what he finds. Heart rate went up, respiration went up, sugar in the blood went up, blood clotting mechanisms went up, muscle function went up, and what do you think happened to digestion? Shut down. Yes. So then they start looking, well, are cats different in humans or is it the same? So this is what they found happens in humans physiologically. Increases the heart rate, increases blood pressure. Does that tell you anything? What we're going to talk about in the next class on cardiovascular disease? What causes blood pressure to go up? It's the number one cause of hypertension that I find. Number one cause. Increased respirations, increased hormones and adrenaline, increased sugar in the blood, increased blood clotting mechanisms, increased muscle function, queasy stomach, nervous perspiration, headache, sporadic eating, increased hunger, loss of appetite, changes in sleep habit, reduction in the digestive system, reduction in the immune system. This is called fight or flight. Now, I don't know why, but when I went over to Africa and I'm talking about this is when the bear's chasing you, they had no idea what a bear was. Y'all must not have bears over there. You don't? But they knew what lions were. And so I talked about lions to them people in Rwanda, and they knew that they need to stay out of their way. So, but we don't have lions. We've got bears, unless you go down to the Asheboro Zoo, and they got lions down there. I stand there one day, and I'm sitting there looking at this cat, and she is a female, and she is staring at me, and I staring at her, and all of a sudden she goes, wham, and hit that plexiglass stuff. Whew, scared me to death. I was glad. Scary. Physiological changes. We find that it shuts down digestion in humans. It shuts down the immune system. But Harvard found, this is cool, Harvard found in their studies of prostate cancer and on breast cancer that it shuts down the healing factor when you're stressed. And what Harvard was looking at, let's say you got a lady who goes in, she's got a lump on her breast, doc palpates, sends her for a mammo, they do a biopsy. She's now what Harvard calls, she's in the period of unknown. Until she sits down with the oncologist and they say, yes, ma'am, you have cancer, here's what we do. And the period of unknown is gone, and the healing factor goes back up working like it's supposed to, according to Harvard. And what they were really upset at is many times when we identify a problem and it goes to the path lab and it can take forever getting in appointments or whatever, and it might be a month to 6 weeks, she said, before that they sit down with that patient and say, Mrs. Jones, here's our recommendation. And she said, that lady now needs her healing factor working, and we should not be making her wait 4 to 6 weeks. And she encouraged physicians across the United States to be fast. Let's get an answer. Even if it's not what maybe you agree with, there's at least a plan. We're out of the psychological period of unknown. Under stress, the body releases cortisol and adrenaline, which raises the blood pressure and prepares the body for doing battle. When physical action is taken, the body uses up the stress hormones in the blood, reducing stress and relaxing the body. Have you ever been stressed and go out for a power walk or a run and the stress goes down? I remember working in healthcare. Sometimes someone might be mad at somebody on the floor or doctor or whoever, and because I was an administrator, the buck stopped there. And they would come in and be angry. And I'd say, go Go take a power walk, come back and talk to me. Or sometimes they'd make me upset. They said stuff that got me going. Has anybody ever said stuff got you going? He said, wait a minute. You go take a walk. I'll take a walk. 2 different directions. We'll come back in 20 minutes and we're going to talk about this. And both of us calm down. Taking a walk many times can prevent many things coming out of here. When physical action is not taken, such as when you are sitting at your desk, stuck in traffic, hurrying to finish our taxes before midnight, the stress hormones and chemicals in our blood remain for long periods of time, thus causing those symptoms that we just saw of 2 slides of symptoms. Stress affects the onset, treatment, or recovery from the following diseases and conditions: cardiovascular disease, cancer, angina pectoris, that's chest pains. Diabetes mellitus, tuberculosis, rheumatoid arthritis, hypertension, ulcers, AIDS. But Walt, I thought AIDS was a bloodborne pathogen. No, HIV. And you can go into full-blown AIDS with stress. I remember y'all remember I was sick when I was here? Did y'all know I was sick when I was here? Actually, when I left here, I had something called ulcerative colitis. And it got so bad when I went to Asheboro, I went over to Asheboro area, the gastroenterologist in Asheboro said, Walt, you're going to die. And so I thought, I got 3 kids at home. I got a wife. I got to look at something else. Unfortunately, when I lived here, I had gone to dinner one time. Who knows Horace Bailey over in Asheville? His wife used to play the harp. She's blonde for 3ABN. Yeah. So I'd gone to dinner with Bailey, and he had told me about this guy that helped him with some issues. And I went to that person. And then 6 months later, I was plumb healed. Plumb healed. But when I was in Asheboro, I remember I started coming down with symptoms. And we took care of a number of AIDS patients there. And my staff were afraid maybe I had gotten AIDS. Well, I know I hadn't done anything to get AIDS personally, or they hadn't bitten me. Sometimes AIDS patients like to bite you because they're mad. Or I hadn't had any lesion issues I'd gotten next to or anything. So I knew I didn't have AIDS. And it turned out to be I had UC. But what happens is stress can take that HIV and throw you into full-blown AIDS because of the stress. Muscle-related conditions, allergies, common colds, warts, skin rashes, loss of hair, graying of hair. Where's the real danger? Acute stress or chronic stress? Chronic stress, yes. Chronic stress, unrelieved stress causes the damage. It's where those hormones are staying elevated in the blood system, causing those physiological problems. But if we get exercise, which can cause that to drop, or pray, ask God to be with us, and all of a sudden, those chemicals come down. Mental effects of ongoing stressors: mental fatigue, loss of spontaneity, creativity, confusion, forgetfulness, difficulty in making decisions, anxiety, depression, lower self-worth, lower intellectual functioning. You ever been just plumb stressed and you just couldn't think right? Boredom, emotional hypersensitivity. You ever been at work and they say, don't talk to the boss today. Them and their wife had a fight. Don't even say nothing. Don't say nothing. He ain't doing good. People are just more sensitive. Feelings of isolation and alienation, tendency towards suppressed feelings, withdrawal, aggression, quick temper, loss of control, increased risk-taking behaviors. Do we ever see that when we're stressed? Do stupid stuff that we normally wouldn't do because we're just angry or stressed or whatever. Increased drug use or abuse, and that's an issue out there. Huge issue out there. Did you know just 1 minute of anger can suppress your immune system for up to 6 hours? Who's ever read Dr. Neil Nedley? Who's ever read the book Proof Positive? That's where I got that information on that. So I was giving a lecture on immune system with a friend of mine. I talked about him earlier. He's a neurologist. And I said, Arvo, and he specializes in brain function. I said, Arvo, help me with this slide. 1 minute of anger 1 minute of stress. Talk to me about physiology. If 1 minute of anger can suppress your immune system, can physiologically, similarly, can 1 minute of stress lower your immune system equally? He goes, absolutely. Absolutely. So you can put in here, did you know that just 1 minute of stress, major stress, can suppress your immune system for up to 6 hours? Have you ever been real stressed about a situation, got in a fight, argument, or stressed about taxes, or stressed about whatever, work or whatever, and then you got sick? Absolutely. And so it's amazing. So we talked about the physiology. Let's talk about what can we do. So we're going to go back and really start looking at prescriptions that you can do. Okay, let's everybody stand up. Let's everybody stand up. We're not going to march. If I won't do it in a church. I don't march in a church. But we're going to sing a song. How many people know a merry heart doeth good like a medicine? All right, so help me out. We're going to sing it twice. And then the second time, we'll all know it. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Like a medicine is a merry heart. But a broken spirit dry up the bones. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Okay, y'all all know it now. Okay, you ready? A merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Like a medicine is a merry heart. But a broken spirit dry up the bones. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine. All right, you can sit down. Got our blood flowing there. I was in New York City. Just out of New York City, north of the city. And we were having a conference for medical folks. And before each meeting, we would sing this song to let folks know we're getting ready to have the next meeting. It was Friday afternoon. And this lady stands up. She's standing back, probably 3/4 of the way back there. It was a large hall. And she says, I need to tell y'all something. She says, my specialty is the bone marrow. That's all I work on, bone marrow. And she said, did you know that when a person is happy, that their bone marrow produces a chemical that builds the immune system? She says, but if they're stressed, they're not a happy person, the bone marrow does not produce that chemical that builds their immune system. Isn't that cool? I think it's cool. So there's another prescription. Do you have a merry heart? Or are you always upset? Wishing you'd had this, wishing you'd had that? Disease is sometimes produced and often greatly aggravated by the imagination. Remember my aunt down in Chattanooga? Many are lifelong invalids who might be well if they only thought so. You know people like that? Yeah. Okay, here's some. Get right. Courage, hope, faith, sympathy, love, promote health, and prolong life. Courage, hope, faith, sympathy, love, promote health, and prolong life. Now, there's one. Who's in finance? Who's finance? So you know bottom line. 2 lines, right? Bottom line. The bottom line to the universe. This is the bottom line to the universe. You have love. Prior to Satan going nuts, or Lucifer going nuts, it was love. And he brought in self. Yes? That's it. That is bottom line. Either you have love or you have self. Now, there will be a time that there'll only be love again, forever. Don't you look forward to that? Now, maybe 4 years ago, somewhere around 4 years ago, psychologists, they started looking at this problem that's going on in America. And they found that people who do this, see what that is? It was a message from EMA. So people who take these selfies more than 3 times, according to psychologists, I'll use some mountain talk, they just ain't right. And they came up with a term called self-itis. That's a medical term today. Self-itis, inflammation of self. Amazing, huh? That's there you go. There's a diagnosis you can use on your people. You got self-itis. But the opposite is love. Now here's the problem. And I can say this very comfortably in this church. Now, usually places only ask me to come to them if they're more conservative. But there are some places that would be very uncomfortable for me to say this. There are churches on Sabbath that only speak love. Though love is the foundation. But there also must be making change and stepping away from wrong. Do you agree? And they don't talk about that. This church understands it, I truly believe. At least it used to. And I believe they still do. Y'all do. So love is so important, but don't get confused that it's just love and just love people, and they can do whatever they want to. And you can do whatever you want to as long as you love them. A contented mind, a cheerful spirit is health to the body and strength to the soul. Are you contented? Are you happy? Are you happy with where you are in your job? Are you happy with where you are in life? Are you one that's always complaining? Well, that can make a difference in health or not having health. And the reason I know this is true, Carson, the pickup truck he bought this year, is a GMC. Is he going to use a Ford manual? Look at what manual you're using for your health. This is the manufacturer. Well, that's not a good word. God, we are not manufactured. But this is the Creator's manual. Would you agree? Yes. Now, I have a very different philosophy than some places I go. But I think y'all share similar belief. Who inspired what Matthew wrote? Who inspired what Moses wrote? Who inspired what Ellen White wrote? Do you get where I'm going? I mean, to me, that's pretty simple. Pretty simple. Okay. Gratitude, rejoicing, benevolence. What is benevolence? We studied that in Sabbath school several years ago. Giving to others. Yeah, giving to others who don't have, are not as fortunate as you are. Trusting God's love and care. These are health's greatest safeguard. Gratitude, rejoicing, benevolence, trusting God's love and care. These are health's greatest safeguards. If you do not have these, you are going to have disease. It's just the way it works. The relation that exists between the mind and the body are very intimate. When one is affected, the other sympathizes. The condition of the mind affects the health to a far greater degree than many realize. Many of the diseases from which men suffer are the result of mental depression, grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust. All tend to break down the life forces and to invite decay and death. My father-in-law told me until he died, if someone don't trust you, is maybe someone, if they don't trust others, maybe they shouldn't be trusted themselves. Do you have grief, mental depression, anxiety, discontent, remorse? You wish you could Do something different? You wish you'd gone into a different field? Wish whatever? Remorse? Guilt? Guilt that you did something? Had a girl come in 2 years ago now, about 2 years ago now. And I mean, she looked like a whoop dog. She looked bad. And I sat down with her and I said, what's wrong? And she said, well, I've been on meth. And she said, I decided to come off it cold turkey. And she said, I went to the ER, and the ER said they don't deal with people like me. And they said to come over and see you. And I said, okay. So we started talking about what to do to help her with these withdrawals that she was having. And I asked her, I said, you go to church? She says, no, I can't go to church. I said, why don't you go to church? She says, I'm not perfect. I said, what are you talking about? She said, people go to church are perfect. You can't go to church unless you're perfect. And so what do you think happened? We quit talking about the meth issue and started talking about another. Do you see how the right hand opens the door for the gospel to walk through? Do you see how it works? Now, I could have said, well, you need to talk to my preacher. But you might have lost the opportunity. In firefighting, I wear different hats. When I come off the mountain and I'm on the fire truck and I come off, I don't actually have a helmet in the truck on. I'll put it on when I get out. We're not supposed to wear a helmet inside the truck. So when I get out, I have a fire helmet. But let's say it's not on fire. The vehicle is let's say it's like that car this morning. It's all crunched around the people like what happened last night. And so do I sit there and I say, well, rescue squad, they'll be here in a while as the person's bleeding out. And so, no. I put on my rescue hat and I pull out jaws of life and we rip the car apart. And then they're bleeding to death. Do I say, well, EMS will be in here in a while? No. I put on my EMS hat and I say, let's go ahead and take care of these people. Let's fix this problem with the scope of what we can do. Or maybe it's a hazmat situation and there's some methyl ethyl bad stuff out on the road. And so I don't say, well, let's wait till Asheville gets here. Let's wait till Morristown gets here. I put on my hazmat hat. So I have to wear different hats to deal with the different situations on that fire scene. And the same true as medical missionaries. We have to wear two different hats. Many times people say there's the medical side, there's the gospel side, and you don't mix the two. Wrong. We're not talking about that today in depth, but I tell you that is wrong. God said that every church is to be a medical missionary center. Every member is to be a medical missionary. And so as that girl then starts talking about, you have to be perfect. Wow, here's a chance. Yes, the right hand opened the door. Now I started talking to her about this guy called Paul. And Paul said that that he was a chief sinner, right? And then I talked to her about this guy by the name of David. She didn't know about Paul. She'd heard about David, but didn't really know about him. I said, did you know he wanted the guy's wife, so he killed the guy? She said, no. I said, God said he was after his own heart. I said, you ain't killed nobody, have you? She looked at me. She said, no, I ain't killed nobody. I said, you're good. And I said, even though he killed somebody, he was still good. He asked God for forgiveness, and God forgave him. We spent 3 hours talking. Do you see how God opens the door? That you can then start talking about what the Bible has to say? Very, very important. Very important. So how can I manage my stress? There's controllables and non-controllables. There's this lady who comes to see me. Her son, I don't know what happened, but something happened, and her son shot a state trooper. So he's put away somewhere out west. She says she can never see her son again. Can't touch him, can't hug him. I can't imagine. Can you imagine that? She can write to him. She can call him on the phone. She can send him packages, but she can never see him again. So what I had her do, I had her write down on a piece of paper all of her stressors. And then I had her, those of y'all in business, y'all know what a T-bar is. Draw a line, what's going well, what's not, what we need to change. So I had her draw a piece of paper. Actually, I drew it. I drew it, and I put controllables and non-controllables. I said, now I want you to take this list of stressors and put them either under controllable or non-controllable. So she did that. Her son is under non-controllable. I said, can you do anything to change that with your sister? Crying, fretting, whatever. Is that going to change it? No. I said, okay. So we put it under the non-controllable side. And there's never thing you can do to fix it. You put it on the non-controllable side. Then I had her rip the paper plumb in half. And I said, now when you go home, I want you to sit down with God, and I want you to ask him to take this paper. Y'all that have kids, would you do anything with them what God would say you could do for them? Would you? Absolutely. I said, even more so, God will do for us. Because he can do even more than we as a parent can do. And I said, you take that, sit down with him and pray and ask God to take that away. Because there's never thing you can do. Fretting, crying ain't going to fix it. It's just going to make you sicker and sicker. Give it to God. And I said to the lady, I said, do you remember God said that if we ask for forgiveness, God will bury it in the deepest ocean? And he says, don't get a submarine. No, he doesn't say that. He says, don't go back down there and get it. But you know what I'm saying. Some people get a submarine, they go back and get it and bring it back up. And God's already, they asked for forgiveness, now they go bring it back up again. I said, don't go get it. And I said, now Satan is going to come and he's going to dangle that in front of you. Your son's in prison. You ain't ever going to see him again. Your son's in prison. You ain't going to see him again. I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to say, in Jesus' name, Satan, get thee behind me. Amen. I said, he can't do nothing. I said, let me share with you a story. Let me share with you a story. I said, I don't think you're this bad. It was a Friday. Mary Lou was at home. She was teaching the kids at homeschool up at the house. And it was a Friday morning. We closed early on Friday. There was about 4 ladies I was helping. There's 4 ladies I was helping. A lady comes walking in our store. You kind of keep an eye on what's going on. She walks in. She walks around them women. She walks around. She comes behind the counter and stands right up to me and says, you Walt? I said, yes, ma'am. Now, this woman, she looked about like what that girl looked like. I mean, terrible, awful. Oh, back to that girl. I had her go home and I had her juice. She didn't have no money. She had 2 twins that were 10 months old. Had her juicing. I learned this from Doug Batchelor. You might not be able to afford a good juicer. Just go to get you some V8 juice. And so I had her go home and get some V8 juice and dollar store V8 juice. She come back the next week. The 2 girls in the office did not even recognize her. She looked so different. Amazing. Amazing what God can do. But anyway, so this lady comes in, and she looked really bad. I mean, bad. And she dressed like a gypsy. She had something stuck to her head. Her hair looked like Princess Leia. I mean, just really different. And she said, you Walt? I said, yes. She said, they told me that you could help me. Can you help me? And I knew it was going to take some time. I said, I'm by myself today. Can you come back Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and I will be here to help you? She says, okay. She walks out. I'm about right here. She says, I'm going to be the worst case you ever had. Walks on out. And we're all looking like, what was that? Monday morning, she was there right on time. So I sit down. She sits down. And we start doing history. She tells me that she's been to psychiatrists, the drugs didn't work, had been to psychologists, and the sessions didn't work, and someone told her maybe herbs that I had would fix her brain. And so we start talking, getting a history about various things. I'm asking her questions about her. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, she says, can I ask you something? Or can I tell you something? Can I tell you something? I said, sure. She says, I can make things levitate. Do you believe me? I said, yes, ma'am. What am I dealing with? I got a problem. So I start praying. Well, that's all she said. Well, so we start more into depth, getting into what's going on with this lady. Well, I got an idea now. So we start asking more and more questions. She says, I need to tell you something else. I said, what's that? She says, you see that place over there, O'Reilly's Auto Parts? They just built it. Yes, ma'am. She says, I can tell you where everything is in that store, and I've never been in that store. Do you believe me? Yes, ma'am. So I really take a why now. We know what we're dealing with, yes? And so we start talking on things to improve brain function. Is brain function important with this situation? Yes. So I start talking to her about things that she might be doing that could be harming the brain. I talk to her about things she could do to help her brain function, because if her brain ain't working right, I can't get through to her. And then I tested something. I said, Jesus, and you would have thought you'd hit her with a cattle prod. She starts shaking. And I said, what's wrong with you? I'm a country boy. I talk to country people. I just talk country. I said, what's wrong with you? And she says, they don't like that name. I said, who's they? They. Not it, not he. They don't like that. Okay. So we keep talking. I'm thinking, okay. So then here's an opportunity, y'all. Here's an opportunity to investigate. I say, God. She didn't shake. And it showed me how much more Satan and his demons hate Jesus than God. So we continued. Let me test this again. Science, you test and retest. So I said, Jesus again, and boo, she goes shaking again. So then I gave her some things to do. And I said, here's what I'd like you to do for the next week. And I said, every time, and I gave her some things to help her with brain function. She didn't bring no money. But are there times that you just help people? Is that not what we're there for? And so I said, here's what I want you to do. Between now and next Monday, when I want you to come back, I want you to say, every time they start talking to you, and she had told me that she gets picked up at night and thrown against the wall. And I confirmed that with her husband later. She told me stuff was happened to her physically by these things that I never even knew it happened. I never knew this stuff happened. And I said, when they come to talk to you, you say, in Jesus' name, Satan, get thee behind me. And I said, you say it until they leave you. I said, I don't care if you say it for 20 minutes. You keep saying it until they quit talking to you. I said, okay. So because she wanted help. So we get up and we start out. And does the Holy Spirit ever tell you stuff like you need to do? Yes. And so you better listen. And the week before, 2 Gideon had come by, 2 men. And they brought me a white New Testament. And I was walking, and I said, just a minute, let me give you a little book. And I went over in front of my counter, and I picked it up where I'd sat, where I have some books. And I said, I want you to read this between now and next Monday. She said, okay. And she left. Next Monday, she was right on time. But she looked like a different lady. She did. What was on her face, have you ever seen someone that's just plumb bad off into where they didn't have the stress? Yeah. Have you ever seen a person right before taxes and they're so stressed out, they're going to get them in time, and then you help them with taxes, or they get help with their accountant, and all of a sudden, boy, doesn't it look like a different face? Absolutely. You've seen that probably in business, finances. And I said, how are you doing? She said, good. I said, are they talking to you? She said, no. I said, why? She says, I say what you told me to say, and they don't try to even talk to me at all now. And I said, did you happen to get a chance to read on that little book I gave you? She says, yes. She says, I especially like the first 4 books in that book. Now, what did she just tell me? she said, I especially like the first 4 books. So she had read more. She'd read more. I said, why did you like those first 4 books? She says, because it talks about Jesus. And she didn't shake it off. So do you see how the right hand opens the door for the gospel to come through? It works because God made it that way to work. So I told this lady whose boy is in prison, I said, you're not this bad off. You're not possessed with demons. And that works when you say, in Jesus' name, Satan, get thee behind me. And so say that when you have these non-controllables. And it significantly helped her. And I encourage you to do the same. Now, the other list, you can do something about them. And I believe us doing something about stuff we can do something about. And I said, now take Jesus' hand and sit down and say, okay, how are we going to fix these? Because there's things we can do to address these. You can't say, okay, I'm 10 years behind in taxes. God, just take care of them. No, you got to have part. You got to do something there and ask him to protect you. Controllables, nutrition, exercise, water. We talked about these this morning. Sunshine, temperance, air, rest, trust in God. Normally I don't talk about that here, but let me share with you here. Someone asked me this, said this morning, they said, oh, that's just that's that old stuff. Do you know how old that is? It was Friday morning. And General Lee was leaving Fredericksburg and heading over to Culpeper. Now, who knows where Culpeper is? Culpeper is the town during the Revolutionary War that came up, the Minutemen of Culpeper came up with that yellow flag that has that snake on it and says, don't tread on me. That came out of Culpeper during the Revolutionary War. So General Lee's leaving Fredericksburg Friday morning, heading to Culpeper. Lincoln finds out through intelligence. He sends Hooker down to cut across and catch Lee and wipe him out. Go to battle. Well, Hooker was delayed, or Lee was faster, whatever happened. They didn't cross paths. Lee makes it onto Culpeper. Then he heads north up the Shenandoah Valley, up towards Pennsylvania for what? Gettysburg. If Hooker had caught Lee, he may not have had Gettysburg. But that wasn't the way it was supposed to be. That was Friday, June 5, 1863. That same day, Elder White, Mrs. White, get in a carriage, and they head towards, who's our Michigan folks? How do you pronounce Otsego? Otsego? O-T-S-E-G-O. Yes? Otsego. That's it. I have a hard time with that. I'll leave it up to the Michiganders. There was an evangelistic series going on there. Elder White, Mrs. White head there. It's about, 30 miles from Battle Creek? Somewhat like whatever it is. It's not too awful far, but in buggies it takes a little while. They get there before sundown. Elder White, Miss White gets out. They go to the family that's hosting them. It's about sundown, and they're standing there, and the man of the house asks Mrs. White to have sundown worship, a prayer, sundown prayer, as they're going into Sabbath. And she puts her hand on Elder White's shoulder, and she starts praying. And she's praying. And all of a sudden, she starts having a vision. Is this right here? This right here. Now, here's what's also interesting. When you read, when she writes about that vision, what is the date that she says it is? June 6. June 6. Now, I went and looked on the maps. I went to Google and I went and looked up, and June, that Friday, that first Friday in June in 1863 was the 5th on the calendar. And in history, it talks about Lee making that move from Fredericksburg to Culpeper is June 5. And when I look at when Lincoln sends Hooker down, that is June 5. So is there a problem? Is she wrong? I can only think of one thing. So I called the White Estate. The director wasn't there, so I talked to the assistant director. And I said, I'm going to only think of one thing. It was after sundown. And he said, yes, sir, that is it. He said, the founders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, when sun went down, they changed the date. Interesting? Interesting, yeah. So yes, have we had this a long time? What's the problem with us having it a long time? We are now ignoring it. We've become anesthetized to it. It's old stuff. I was sitting one day, a couple came in from Knoxville for health issues. She goes to the bathroom, husband's sitting there, and he looks at this poster that Carson had made. And it had these on there. And all of a sudden he goes, that is the key to health. Now this guy's getting ready to retire, mid-60s, been in health his whole career. He said, that is the key to health. I said, what are you talking about? I want to hear, out of their mind. What are they thinking? What are you talking about? I didn't say, yeah, you're right, it is. No, why? Why do you say that? And he said, I've worked in healthcare my whole career. Those items right there are the keys to health. And what do we do with these? Do we just ignore them? That's just something Granddaddy did, or Grandma, or Mom, or they did it at church when I was a little kid. They're the foundation, y'all. They're the foundation of why? Because the Creator gave it to us. You change your oil every 3,000 miles. I know someone just recently messed up their car. They don't change the oil. Do we just do our own thing? Well, they have consequences. They didn't change the oil. It's physiology. Nutrition. And I won't get into all of this for time, but let me see what I can do. The increased amount of adrenaline that is suddenly released into the body during stress causes the body to mobilize and quickly utilize important vitamins and nutrients such as amino acids, vitamins, B vitamins, vitamin C, and minerals like magnesium, potassium, and phosphorus. If you want to read more on this, Neil Nedley is a good source. Depression the Way Out. Y'all read that book? He's a good source on this type of research. It is therefore critical to ensure adequate and consistent replenishment. That's interesting, adequate and consistent. The word I like using is contiguous. Do you know the difference in consistent and contiguous? These rows are contiguous, constant, not consistently. You might skip a few times. Contiguous doesn't skip. It's best to be contiguous. And consistent replenishment of these important nutrients during times of physical, emotional, and physiological stress. Today, most individuals lead chronically stressed lives without a sufficient intake of essential minerals and vitamins. Through a healthy diet, remember we talked about minerals earlier this morning. Minerals are the catalysts that kick on vitamins, and vitamins are the catalysts that kicks on fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. And if you don't have, even though you eat enough fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, if you don't have adequate vitamins and minerals, then they're not going to run at 8 cylinders. And even though you have adequate vitamins, they're still not going to run on 8 cylinders unless you have enough minerals to kick the vitamins on. And then the vitamins to kick the fats, proteins, and complex carbohydrates on. It all has to work together. Essential minerals and vitamins through a healthy diet and supplementation to compensate for their body's increased need. Many are very vulnerable to the damaging physical effects of stress. Now, who has ever listened to T. Colin Campbell? Campbell was my professor. I took nutrition courses from Cornell. And Campbell, he's really big into food, phytochemicals. And he doesn't like using supplements that much. And one day I asked him, I said, Dr. Campbell, who's ever talked to Campbell? He's just so easy to talk to. He's just like talking to anybody else. He's just a great guy. He was an old farm boy. Grew up in Southwest Virginia on a dairy farm, cattle and beef cattle. And I said, Dr. Campbell, an old doc at Florida Hospital told me and taught me in 1978 that if I use B complex, it's amazing. It's the best thing he found for addressing stress. And I've applied that for years. And if I use B complex 100, which is 100 milligrams of some like B2, B3, B6, and micrograms like B12, then if I use a B complex 100, one each meal, this is the outcome I get. I said, Dr. Campbell, how can I get that in food? He said, Walt, you can't get that much in food. I said, so what do? He says, depends on the acuity of the patient. Try the food. If that's not enough, you'll have to supplement. And that's exactly what Neil Nedley says in his book, Depression: The Way Out. Try to get it through the food. Neil shows you the food. But Neil says if you can't get enough through the food, you're going to have to supplement. Because see, when you're stressed, you dump nutrients. It happens. You dump vitamin C. You dump E on the immune side. You dump zinc on the immune side. On the stress side, you're dumping Bs, you're dumping lithium, you're dumping magnesium. And so you got to have enough to deal with the next stressor. You need those nutrients, and you just dump them. Unless your diet has adequate, then you're going to have to supplement, depending on the acuity or how much you're stressed. Without the sufficient intake of essential minerals and vitamins through a healthy diet and supplementation to compensate for their body's increased need, many are very vulnerable to the damaging physical effects of stress. That's very true. So we've got vitamin A, B vitamins, C, vitamin A. Vitamin A plays an important role in maintaining immune function. As an antioxidant, it protects immune function by helping to maintain the integrity of the epithelial barriers to infections. It also activates the phagocytes and cytotoxic T cells. Studies also show that vitamin A confers a protective effect against the preoxidation in the heart and brain. Preoxidation is believed to be a risk factor for heart attacks and stroke. Food's high in vitamin A, so we want to get it from food if we can. And where is the best place to get your food? From your backyard, or your front yard, or your whole yard. Your own food. Why? Because you know the soil. Does the soil have the nutrients in the soil? Number two, you know the seeds that you put. Did you use hybrid or did you use heirloom? Then you know what was put on it. And then you know what was sprayed on it. And then you know whether it was picked vine ripe or not. Did you know that frozen food can be more nutritious than the produce section? Because a friend of mine who grew cherries, he said that when they come in and pick his cherries, and they were going to freeze it, they they picked it vine ripe or true ripe, and they flash froze it within less than 24 hours and put it in the freezer. Who grew up on a farm? Who's put up hay? Who put up hay? Okay, so you put up hay, and hay has like a bell curve in nutrition, right? And you pray that when it's most nutritious, it's not raining. Yes? Because if it's raining, what's going to happen if you put it up? It's going to mold. So you either need to cut it ahead of time if it's going to be a whole long rain, or you cut it after, but still you lost nutrition. Well, the same thing's true with food. And so where we live, they do a lot of tomatoes. And when they pick the tomatoes, they are green. Are those vine ripe? Do they have the most nutrients? Which would you rather have? I had a really good mater sandwich today. Do you want to pick a green mater and eat a mater sandwich green? Or do you want a nice red, just feels just right? Yes. And so you want food that is vine ripe, to speak generically, amongst however it's grown. And the best place to have that is in your backyard, where you grow your own food. You know your soil. You know what the seeds are. You know what you put in. Sweet taters, cooked for vitamin A. Now, carrots. Does this mean we only want to cook carrots? No, because there's, like the vitamin A, the beta-carotene, you've got more when it's cooked, but a whole lot more items are better when eaten raw. And so you can do a combination cooked and raw to get the most nutrition. Squash, butternut, cooked to get the vitamin A. Cantaloupe, now they didn't cook that one. See, we don't cook cantaloupes. Dark leafy greens, cooked. Tropical fruit, again, not cooked. Sweet red peppers. Dried apricots. Romaine lettuce. B-complex vitamins. Vitamin B, or B vitamins, are necessary for numerous body processes, including but not limited to energy production and metabolism. Studies show a positive association with intake of certain B vitamins and health. Studies show improved thiamine or vitamin B1 status correspond with improved mood. So if you got anybody who's got a mood issue, give them B1. We also said give them water, exercise. There's a bunch of them this morning dealt with mood. Niacin, also a member of the B vitamin family, which is B3, is found to be beneficial for stress-related conditions. Niacin has antioxidant activities, and studies corroborate its beneficial effects in lowering high cholesterol and triglyceride levels and protecting against atherosclerosis. That's clogged arteries. Food highest in B1, acorn squash, navy beans, green peas, nuts, dried roasted soybeans, asparagus, sunflower seeds. B2, almonds. What did Miss White say was the king of the nuts? Almonds, yeah. Raw brown Italian mushrooms. Let me go back. Sesame. Let's see here. Sesame seeds and spinach. B3, avocados, green peas and fresh green peas. Peanuts, are peanuts a nut? A legume. Are cashews a nut? No, they're flour. Sunflower seeds, portobello mushrooms, vitamin C. Vitamin C is another powerful antioxidant that scavenges free radicals and protects against some of the harmful effects of stress. See, vitamin C has a half-life of how long? 30 minutes. 30 minutes. That's your half-life on vitamin C. So people say, well, I take one vitamin C every day, once a day. That's not enough. You need to take it in multiple doses to get the most benefit. Oh, let me go back. I don't think I fully read that, did I? Stress is another powerful antioxidant, scavenger of free radicals, and protects against some of the harmful effects of stress. Studies indicate that cellular levels of vitamin C drop when subjected to stress. It's true. Supplementation of vitamin C was found to be beneficial in this case. I won't go into all the studies, but in a study of 120 males and females subjects, researchers reported that vitamin C, 3,000 milligrams a day, decreased the rise in blood pressure, cortisol, and anxiety that typically accompany acute physiological stress. Acute physiological stress. Pardon? Oh, thank you. Psychological. I read it wrong twice. Psychological. In the same research study where vitamin C was reduced by stress, it was found that vitamin E also reduced at cellular levels. Minerals, you got magnesium, calcium, zinc, potassium, lithium. Magnesium is an essential mineral, especially during stress. Magnesium is often referred to as the anti-stress mineral. It's also called the depression medication, magnesium. During stress response, cortisol and adrenaline release, the body simultaneously releases magnesium to offset the jarring effects of the adrenaline. We talked to that earlier. So, if a person has chronic stress, do you know people who are just plumb stressed all day long? You know people who are just stressed all night long? They have nightmares, and so they're all day long dumping magnesium. And magnesium is huge. Why do we see so much restless leg syndrome? The number one cause of restless leg syndrome is magnesium deficiency. 75% of restless leg syndrome is magnesium deficiency. If that person is very prone to stress, there's a good chance it could be the magnesium deficiency. Number 2 is dehydration. Number 3 is potassium. I was toned out one morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. Get this lady's house. Daughter finds her in the bathroom, plumb out. I woke her up with some stuff I had, and she became a wild woman. I mean, plumb wild. And it took 3 of us to hold her down on the stretcher to get her off the mountain down to the hospital. And we wheel into the ED, and the female physician says, I ain't putting up with her. Send her on to UT. Intubate her and send her to UT. Well, I was glad for that, because, see, it was that same place that she had gone to years before for restless leg syndrome, I found out later. And they said, here, this will take care of your restless leg syndrome. And it was just narcotics. She got hooked on the narcotics, became an addict, overdosed, got to UT, and guess what they found out was root cause? She had a potassium deficiency. That's it. Pumped up her potassium. She hasn't had any more problems with restless leg. She keeps her potassium up. She's fine. Crazy, isn't it? Crazy. Chronic stress, and the other one for restless leg is iron. Now, this is interesting. We're seeing an increase, at least in our neck of the woods, of those that come into the ED with restless leg syndrome, and the docs are testing, and they're finding more and more that are having iron deficiency. And I asked one of the docs, he's a friend of mine, I said, what do you reckon? Y'all know what do you reckon is? Some of y'all not from around here may not know that. What do you think? And he said, you know what it is, Walt. He said, they're eating fast food. They're not eating green leafy vegetables. And they're not getting iron. And if they're not getting iron, they're more prone to restless leg iron. They're more prone to restless leg syndrome. Chronic stress can induce a vicious cycle of magnesium deficiency. Magnesium deficiencies are also seen in patients with stress-related conditions of diabetes and hypertension. I won't go into that one. Calcium. As an electrolyte, calcium performs a number of crucial biological functions, including muscle contraction, nerve conduction, glandular secretion, energy production, and maintenance of the immune function. It is said in physiology that the most important mineral is calcium. We've got to keep that calcium where it belongs. It's huge. Calcium has been shown to have an effect. Now, what's your best source of calcium? Pardon? Greens. Yeah, this book really changed my thoughts. It's written by a physician. It's called it's called Death by Calcium. Death by Calcium. And it really changed my view on that. Our best source is green leafy vegetables. Green leafy vegetable. Now, it is true. You have people say, I don't do that. I don't do greens. Well, you got to go to second best and look at supplementation. But if you do give calcium supplementation, be cautious, and many physicians miss this. If you give calcium, say 1,000 milligrams of calcium, you better give 500 milligrams of magnesium, because it takes half the amount of calcium to break the calcium down. Half the amount of magnesium to break the amount of calcium down. So if you give 1,200 milligrams of calcium, you better give 600 milligrams of magnesium. People say, well, I'm taking my CalMag, a 2:1 ratio. That's not enough. That magnesium's taking care of the calcium. You need some more magnesium. Calcium has been shown to have an effect on the reduction of systolic. Which one's that one? The top one or the bottom one? The top one. Blood pressure with persons diagnosed with hypertension. It could be you just have low calcium. In addition, supplementary intake of calcium have been associated with significantly reducing the patient's risk of a stroke. But I encourage eating the calcium out of your backyard. Zinc. Zinc is really important. Did you know that men are more prone to dump zinc than women? That's just how we're made physiologically. We dump zinc more than women do. Zinc levels decline rapidly following injury or physical stress, and zinc is also rapidly lost in the urine following acute and chronic stress. You heard a lot about zinc during COVID and the immune system, but be careful. Let's say you take 30 to 50 milligrams of zinc a day. What do you take if your copper is high to lower the copper? What do you take if you have a high copper level? Your labs come back high copper. What's the first way to attack that? Give zinc. So, when you take a zinc pill to build your immune system, or if you have thyroid problems, very important for thyroid problems, also take 3 to 5 milligrams of zinc, of copper, because when you take zinc, it can lower your copper, just like taking calcium can lower your magnesium. Zinc levels decline rapidly following injury or physical stress, and zinc is also reported rapidly lost in the urine following acute and chronic stress. And if you have acute or chronic stress, that's going to dump your immune system. It's also going to affect brain function. When the body is stressed, potassium is quickly excreted from the body. When we're stressed, cortisol goes up, potassium goes down, we have hypertension. And so I get a call from a buddy of mine one day. He's a surgeon. And he said, Walt, he says, we know that low potassium can cause hypertension. I got another physician buddy that has hypertension, and I want to up his potassium. And what's your best source of potassium? Now, what was his problem here? He was giving a good pill instead of a bad pill. Yes, he could take blackstrap molasses, and that's a great way to increase potassium. And that's what he did. And literally within a short period of time, this physician was off his hypertensive meds because he was just pumping his body full of potassium through taking blackstrap molasses. But why was his potassium down? Because he was stressed. Let's get to root cause, fix his stress, then his potassium is not going to tank. And he doesn't have to take the blackstrap molasses, though blackstrap molasses is good for us. Okay. For y'all local people, Sunday morning, Johnny gets up, goes to the kitchen table. Mama's making pancakes, and he sits at the table, and Mama says, Johnny, you want some molasses? Johnny goes, Mama, how can I have no molasses if I had no molasses? How can I have molasses if I hadn't had no molasses? That's for y'all local people. Important for the transmission of nerve impulses and the contraction of cardiac, skeletal, and smooth muscle. There's much evidence indicating that a low intake of potassium can be an important contributor to hypertension. Well, it's true, it can. But let's get to the root cause. Let's get to the stress that's making it dump. Accumulated evidence suggests that a diet rich in potassium may be protective not only against hypertension, but also against strokes and cardiovascular disease. Lithium. Lithium is phenomenal, y'all. Now, I had a lady come in yesterday morning, and she's taken 1,200 milligrams of pharmaceutical lithium. Now, is that a lot? That's a mess of lithium. That's not what I'm talking about here. Not the synthetic lithium. You want the element lithium, and it's amazing. Lithium, a trace element, has been found to be beneficial and effective on human behavior in very small quantities. Historically, people have bathed and drank lithium-rich water for its calming and relaxing effects. So lithium, there's two major kinds. There's lithium aspartate and lithium orotate, O-R-O-T-A-T-E. And lithium orotate I like better than aspartate, but it's phenomenal for stress, anxiety, depression, super good for bipolar and schizophrenia. I had a guy come in one day. He called me first and he says, Walt, I need to come see you. I said, come on. Owns his own business in a county away, and a very religious man. And he said, Walt, I'm having bad thoughts. What kind of bad thoughts you having? Taking a gun to my head. He said, it's so bad I can't even work. So I encouraged him some B complex, some lithium, some magnesium, but especially lithium. He had a visit with the doc that week and mentioned to him that he was starting to take lithium orotate. And the doc told him that guy down in Newport don't know what he's talking about, and I'll prove it to you. He drew some labs to prove that his lithium was fine, his lithium was low. So, but it wasn't working. And so he comes back and I said, I was doing 5 milligrams 3 times a day. And he said, I need more. He said, I believe God wants me to have more of that stuff. I'm impressed that God tells me I need lithium. Can God do that? Does God do that? Yes. So I said, okay, I've only read 40 milligrams at this point. Let's go to 40. Didn't work. He says, I'm still impressed. I need lithium. I said, I don't know how to go further than that. I haven't found anything showing more than 40. So he goes, okay, and he went to another guy. This other guy pumps him up to 100 of lithium. But then I found out later that it's actually prescribed to Alzheimer's patients who are having Alzheimer's fits. They prescribe them lithium orotate, which is an element, 100 milligrams for Alzheimer's fits. And it works great. But I didn't know that yet. So this other guy has him on 100 milligrams a day, and boom, depression's gone. Every once in a while, he'll call me. And he'll say, Walt, I ain't doing good. And Maria knows, Mary Lou knows, Walter knows. If he calls, I need to talk to him now. I might be on another call, but I need to talk to him because, again, he's in that state. And I say, what's going on? He says, it's bad again. He says, I don't remember what to do. Tell me, what do I need to do? He can't remember. All he can remember is call. And so I say, have you taken your lithium orotate? He goes, no, that's it. He says, I need you to remember. And he's done that multiple times. And boom, takes his lithium orotate, boom, he's back up again like where it belongs. Lithium's powerful. I had this guy used to come in, and he's bipolar. And this guy was one of those guys, I don't know if you've ever seen him, butts in inappropriately when you're talking to somebody, and he just cuts right in. And, you know, he's rubbing his hand through, and you've seen these people before. So he also is very smart. He's disabled because of his condition. And his hobby is studying how to kill people on the internet. I don't see why they haven't picked him up yet. And he doesn't like Walmart because Walmart has stupid people, and he thinks he's a smart guy, and he thinks general people are stupid, and they make him upset, and he thinks about killing them. And Walmart really makes him upset when he goes to Walmart because he says there's a lot of stupid people walking in Walmart. So he comes in one day, and I mean, he's really not good. And I said, I'm talking to another person, but you okay? He goes, no. He goes, I need some help. And he said, I've decided, he says, them drugs ain't working, I ain't taking them again. Stopped all psychotropics. And this guy's really bad bipolar that studies how to kill people. And he said, I came to you for help. I said, okay. So I went and got some B complex. I got some lithium. I got some magnesium. And those are great go-to immediate items. He says, I ain't got no money. I said, it's fine. I'm thinking, don't go to Walmart. And I did. I think that. And so I said, here, you can have these. Take them. And he came back a week later, and this guy was cool as a cucumber, normal. And I said, how you doing? He goes, I could tell right off this guy was doing good. And he said, I'm doing good, Walt. He says, you gave me my life back. I said, God gave you your life back. Don't take the credit. Do not take the credit. You'll fall and bust your nose because it's God does it. And I said, God gave you your life back. I said, what happened? He said, I tried your B complex. I tried the magnesium. Hadn't tried that lithium before. And that made the difference. Amen. Amazing, isn't it? Amazing. And God gave us these simple little tools that are so powerful. Great tool to use. Herbs, Siberian ginseng, or as we call sang. You know what it's called when a person goes picking ginseng? Who's from the mountains? What do we call it when a person goes pick ginseng? I'm going singing. That's what it means. If someone says, well, I'm taking off work tomorrow, I'm going singing, they're going to pick ginseng. Valerian root, wood betony, chamomile, hops, skullcap, vetiver. Vetiver is a good friend of mine. It's huge. I'll tell you about it. Lavender, another good friend. Siberian ginseng. Siberian ginseng has long been used as an anti-stress herb. It has demonstrated anti-fatigue, anti-stress, immuno-enhancing, and antidepressive effects. Do not go picking it where you are not wanted. You can get lead poisoning. Valerian is a well-known herbal calmative, antispasmodic, nerve tonic, used for hypochondria, nervous headaches, irritability, mild spasmodic effects, affections, depression, and insomnia. Studies have found that valerian works best as a sleep aid over a period of a month rather than a single dose. And that's true. I find that many times. Stinks too, real bad. Does taste nasty too. If you do it in a tea. Wood betony has traditionally been used to treat anxiety and neuralgia. Wood betony acts as a tranquilizer and contains glycosides and have hypotensive characteristics. Chamomile. Who's drank chamomile tea? Tastes good? I think it smells better than it tastes. It smells real good. Chamomile has a sedative effect. Hops. I literally have people ask, and when I tell them they need to use hops, they're afraid they're going to get drunk. Well, yes, beer has hops in it, but you ain't getting drunk from drinking hops. But people do. They think they'll get drunk from drinking hops tea. Hops is powerful. People used to take pillows and make a hops pillow under the regular pillow and stick it in a pillow and lay and breathe it and breathe the hops and it will calm them down. Skullcap, another great tool. Skullcap has sedative and antispasmodic effects. Skullcap has also been used for nervous tension. Did anybody know Dr. Walter Strachan from Loma Linda? Strachan was an amazing guy. He was a psychiatrist. Last 14 years of his career, he didn't use one pharmaceutical. And as I started working with patients who had depression up at the clinic in D.C., outside of D.C., I brought Strachan in to help me out. Strachan said, give them skullcap tea for depression. He said, you use a quart of water, bring it to a boil, make you an infusion, cup of skullcap herb into the tea. And he said you can make it thick as mud if you want to, if you can get them to drink it. Works very, very good for depression. Today, most individuals lead chronically stressed lives without a sufficient intake of essential minerals and vitamins to compensate for their body's increased need. Many are very vulnerable to the damaging and physical effects of stress. Let me go back to vetiver. Who's ever used vetiver? Yeah? What do you use it for?
My son couldn't pay attention in school, so you actually suggested it.
Okay.
And it did work. I just used the oil.
Yes.
To have him breathe it in because he was only little.
Yes. What did you use it for?
Same. I use the essential oil, and you can use it for people who have.
Where'd you place it? Where did you place it?
Well, you can place it in pressure points.
And somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere around your neck.
Yes.
So they can inhale it.
Inhale it, yeah. Who else has used vetiver? Yes? How'd you use it? Pardon? Smell it? Yes? Anyone else? Vetiver is phenomenal. I had a lady come in one day. I was at the cash register, and Mary Lou wasn't there. I was helping. I had 3 ladies I was helping, and a girl comes walking in. She walks over and she steps over by my essential oils, and you know, you keep track of folks, and I could tell she just wasn't doing good. She's about to blow up like Mount St. Helen. And I look over and I said, just a minute. And I walk over to her and I said, ma'am, are you okay? And she says she's having the most, it's the worst anxiety attack that she'd ever had. And I said, can I help you? She said, please. So I told the other ladies, I said, I'll be back. So I walked in the other room. I used vetiver. When I was, and I don't know if y'all know this about me, when I was in high school, I had someone ran a stop sign, ran over me. I was on a motorcycle, and it gave me a concussion. And out of that, I got Tourette's. Now, would you think I have Tourette's?
No.
Yes. Mary Lou will tell you I got them. Sometimes it gets bad. But the biggest thing is get my sleep, water, B-complex, lithium, magnesium. And there's times that I start having problems, and Mary Lou knows. She gets me vetiver and lavender, and it's over. It's over. I mean, it gets so bad that I babble. It gets bad that I'm doing this. I'm doing stuff that I shouldn't be doing. I get to a point I can't even hardly walk. It's terrible. And the neurologist says, you got Tourette's. That's what's wrong with you. And I thought I was possessed when it first was. I mean, I was babbling. You know, I thought, what was that about, you know? But vetiver helps me tremendously. And so what I did is I went over this, I got mine, and I went over to the girl, and I said, let me put this on first. Now, can you imagine someone that has major anxiety and say, Doc, would you take this medicine first? Let me see how you react to it. They're not going to do that. And so I went up to her, and I said, let me show you about this. And so I put 1 drop of lavender. Now, lavender has a lot less viscosity. It runs a whole lot more. So I'm breathing it. Then I got the vetiver. Now it's got a thick viscosity. It's like motor oil in January or February. And I put it on there. It takes forever to drop. Boom, it got there. And you rub it. Now transdermally, like a nicotine patch, a nitro patch, it's going to go into the blood. And then you're doing this. Real slow, and you're breathing it in. Where's it going? Into the lungs, into the blood. It's getting into the blood again. And so that's how you're getting it in. So I said, here, try this out. So she said, yes. So I put it on her. I said, now, I want you to breathe this. I'll be back in a minute. So I walked back over to where I was helping this lady. And so I did not even finish with her. Walter finished over by the herb cabinet, sitting down helping somebody. And I noticed he get up, and I said, Walter, and I let him know now, help this lady. And so he walks over, ma'am, can I? And he starts talking to her. She starts talking. And it was a different lady. I said, just a minute, to the next person. I walked over there. And I said, how are you doing? Literally, it was a different voice. Not that she was possessed, but have you ever dealt with people who are really stressed and anxiety and or a person who's calm? She was calm. That fast, she was calm. And she looks up at me and she says, what did you just do to me? I said, that's what God did. See? Open the door and let the gospel through. You give the credit to God. It's so important. But lavender and vetiver are tremendous tools to use for that. Exercise is huge. Exercise is a form of physical. Exercise is a form of physical stress. Can physical stress relieve mental stress? Yes. Alexander Pope thought so. Strength of mind is exercise, not rest. Plato agreed exercise would cure a guilty conscience. You'll think so too if you learn to apply the physical stress of exercise in a controlled, graded fashion. Anyway, stress. So what are some tools we can use? We've got about 5 minutes to go. No, we're about over there. So what are some things we can do that we talked about? B complex. We talked about lithium. We talked about magnesium. I keep saying it over and over and over. I believe in repetitive. Those are great tools. What else for stress? Water. Water's huge. What else? Essential oils. Okay. What are they? Yes. And there's some others that can calm you. Skullcap. Some people, I went to one church up in Michigan. The wife wouldn't even come listen to me of the pastor. Because on the way home, they grilled me and wanted to know what I thought about essential oils. I said, I believe essential oils are good. She wouldn't come to any of my classes. She said they were of the devil. And I said, why? New Agers use them. I said, New Agers drink water. New Agers are even vegan. And I said, did you know that just one drop of peppermint essential oil, all they've done is they've distilled it? And I asked her, I said, have you ever used lavender essential oil? Yeah. Have you ever used eucalyptus essential oil? Yes. You know, where did eucalyptus, what's that stuff eucalyptus is in? Vicks. Where did Vicks start? Where? Yeah, Greensboro. It's in North Carolina. That's just down the road. One drop of peppermint essential oil. You're going to get the medicinal benefit in drinking tea. You're going to have to drink 26 or 28 cups of peppermint tea. And I want to say it's 28, but I'll say 26 just in case. That's a lot versus one drop. It's herbs on steroids. It's just they've just concentrated. You ever drank concentrated orange juice? Yeah. What else? Exercise, rest. There's a lot of things you can do for stress, but the most important, trusting God. Let's take a break. How long do we want to take a break? And we're going to come back. And what we're going to talk about this next time is I'm not going to go up there, but I'm going to talk about cardiovascular disease. What do you do to reverse hypertension? What do you do to reverse atherosclerosis? What do you do to improve a poor ejection fraction? What do you do to strengthen that left ventricle? What do you do for cholesterol? What do you do for triglycerides? How do you raise the HDL? Those kind of things. We're going to talk about that when we come back. How long do you want to take a break? 10 minutes. All right. I'll see you at 4:13. Yes.